welcome to Tea Time with an industry professional. Today's speaker is the lovely Roshell Davis.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jordan. I am the co-director of events here and director of social media here. And we're so glad to have you, Roshell. I guess like a first question that people have, or pretty much like, how did you get started in animation? Did you like have a love for it from the beginning, or it kind of like you just fell into it?
So, as most of you know, I took a non-traditional path to animation. I actually didn't see or realize there were career paths if you weren't an artist or a designer. But I grew up watching cartoons. I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember like One Saturday Morning, and then also like Nick, like watching all those shows like Doug, and then we have Rugrats and Darkwing Ducks. And yeah, I grew up watching a bunch of those shows, but I never thought, or it wasn't on my radar, that there was a career path for that for me or anyone, I guess, outside of being an artist. But I was working in the chairman of film's office at Fox Filmed Entertainment, and the recruiter that I worked with to get that role, when my assignment was ending for the current role, he's like, hey, like, I know you're working on like your path to PR, but I have this role open over here in animation. Would it be something that you'd be interested in doing in the meantime? And I was like, sure, why not? And that first role was working front desk at the Cleveland show. So
Awesome.
I went over there and I didn't plan to stay in animation at all. I just was like, something to do. But when I got there, I was very curious and started learning about animation. I would go to different folks' office and kind of ask them to show me what they were doing and just kind of be a fly on the wall and observe what they were doing. And the more I learned, the more interested I got. And I realized like, hey, this is a thing. Well, also on the side, I was doing PR stuff. I was doing some freelance gigs. I had a mentor who worked for a PR firm that did some events for Disney. Even I worked the Radio Disney Music Awards one year.
Oh, okay, cool.
Carpet and stuff. And so I was doing some PR things on the side while also full-time working in animation, and then kind of realizing like, hey, I kind of like love this now. There's a path here. Do I want to pivot to this while also kind of still exploring PR, but realizing the demand for that? And like, there was more of the excitement and allure of like working red carpets, working with talent and all of this, but it was also kind of exhausting. I was like, do I want to follow this career path where I'm on call 24/7, and kind of realizing that this may not be exactly what I want to do, but then seeing this thing over here and thinking like, can I do this? But also not having that background. But clearly I stayed on that path because I'm still here today. So that's kind of how I got my intro into animation.
For a lot of people, they think that you have to go on a straight path based on your major or based on your degree, or otherwise you're not going to get a shot in this industry. And yeah, I mean, very much clutch that recruiter friend that you did have.
It's also really interesting that you say that. Most people think that you have to follow the career path of your degree, which is very untrue. There are so many people that are working in a job or an industry that had nothing to do with their degree.
Yeah.
And one, there's also a thing of learning. Like I've, dealt with this like whole imposter syndrome thing of like, I didn't have like a background in animation. I don't know all these things, but I learned everything I learned on the job, and it's possible to do it. And you can also take courses outside to learn and figure things out.
For sure.
So don't let that hold you back.
Yeah, that's really important to listen to, though. Don't let it hold you back. So following up with that, I was wondering, what fundamental skills or experiences did you feel like you learned at that first step in your career in animation? Because I know that you um, it's kind of like you're saying, you kind of like stepped, because you were studying to be a journalist, right?
Well, my degree was journalism because at CISA and the public relations program is in the journalism school. So
Okay.
I was going to be a publicist.
Publicist. Okay. So, so then the experiences that you have from that first step of, being, working on the Cleveland show, and then then afterwards, working on American Dad, what did you feel like what fundamental skills do you feel like you learned that you feel like you took with you?
So I'd say skills that I learned even prior to actually being in animation were very helpful. Like from I guess not my first job, but my first job post graduation, working in Chairman of Film's office as an assistant, like learning organizational skills, learning who the players are from that field. Because, the voices in animated shows are recorded by actual real talent, real people. So learning players on that side, who the talent is, who the agents are, managing calendars, learning how to use like Outlook and different software programs, all of that stuff built a foundation for me to move over into this side. And then like with the Cleveland show, I had, since I was working the front desk, I had the ability to be in animation and like dip my toe in it, but I didn't have that many responsibilities. I was helping with conference room scheduling when talent would come in for table reads, like kind of like helping them out, greeting folks and scheduling meetings, doing kind of like coordinating events and like fun in office activities and whatnot, answering phones, all of those things that a lot of people have missed out on because they started working in a pandemic and so it was remote. But learning those things at a slower pace allowed me to also on the side step into folks' offices and sit with people and learn what they did for the show and how the pieces fit together. So I'd encourage people to be curious, like talk to folks, like people are excited to show you what they're doing and how they do it. So take those opportunities up, especially since some of us are now working hybrid. You have that opportunity to see people in real life and in office and kind of just go sit and observe.
I love that. Yeah. You can learn through anything just by being a friendly face and just being like, I'm interested in learning. I do feel like once you do get into animation, it can be that friendly place. And, people, I do know that, people that in animation, we have this stereotype that, everyone's so shy and everything because we don't want to step on people's toes. But, it is really important that if the opportunity presents itself, to come in and try to talk to people that you're working with. I think that's really great. So knowing that you spent 7 years being a production assistant in the animation production, because you worked on the Cleveland show for a little bit, and then you spend the majority of the time on American Dad, and you stepped into a legal role. How was that stepping out of a creative environment to getting into like a legal environment?
It was really different.
I can imagine.
It was less exciting.
Yeah.
Pretty quiet. That role. So for those of you who don't know, at the end of 2018, I resigned from my role at American Dad because I decided I wanted to live in New York. And I felt that if I didn't do it at that time, then I probably wouldn't do it. And it was pre-pandemic, so working remotely wasn't an option. So I moved to New York without a job, and I ended up landing a temp assignment at CBS, and I was working with the legal department. And then I ultimately also worked with the business development side. And it was very, very different. It was also a thing where it was like temporary thing while I figured out what I was going to do while I was there.
Yeah. So then it was like a big change because you wanted to move into that step of your life of going to New York.
Yeah. I always wanted to live in New York. I was always fascinated with it. And even before I had visited, I think the first time I visited was, I believe, 2015, 2016. It was 2016. I think it was 2016. Because then I decided that I am definitely doing this. And then I started saving for like a year and then I made the move.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like with all the movies and stuff like that, they always focus it on New York, So it makes a lot of sense. After spending about 3 years out of the creative field, I was wondering, when you kind of stepped back into animation and you became a production coordinator of the Proud family, did you feel like your love of animation and experience you had in the business/graphic design area came together? Because I know that you also, after the CBS position, which was the legal coordinator, you went into brand design, right?
Yes, I worked at an architecture and design firm
Mhm.
in the brand design studio and also with the digital experience design studio.
Okay, cool.
And so I worked with graphic artists. So it was different, but a lot of the same.
Okay, cool.
Just using a different tool, but they were still artists, different environment, but it's still, we had multiple projects floating at once, kind of still creating artwork, but a different type of artwork being created. So I don't think it was that far removed from animation.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, because then when people are thinking about animation and things like that, sometimes it feels like when there aren't opportunities that specifically align to what they want to go into right now, they're like, okay, I actually am going to go into this different sector to become a coordinator or become, maybe like a manager or something like that. So then maybe, I don't know, hopefully that it will apply back when I go into animation. But it seems like your time at the architecture place, it kind of got you back in the mindset of kind of dealing with creative processes and stuff. So when you step back in the production coordinator role, you're kind of like, okay, even though it's a little different because it's animation, it kind of prepared me to get back into that creative mind space.
I agree with that. And it's still like you're working with teams. So you're learning to manage teams, projects, pipelines. All those things are transferable and the same thing that you'll be doing in animation, just for a TV show, instead of like the architecture and design firm worked on different projects across different sectors, but some animation studios were actually clients of the architecture and design firm. They created and build spaces. They also would do change management things or branding and packaging, marketing materials for a new brand that's launching or rebranding a brand. But there's still a pipeline to follow. There's still a group of artists that you're helping support and or manage and a workflow.
Pretty much that is pretty cool to hear that within that, it's kind of like when it comes to creating art, the production pipeline is still kind of similar, even though it's kind of different in a lot of ways, because then you're doing it for, art within a building. So, yeah, that's really cool. So, kind of stepping back into Disney and getting back in there, pretty much I wanted to ask, how is it moving back from New York to LA and the transition back into that space?
Back into the animation space.
Yeah.
One, immediately I thought, I was like, it was different when I came back because we were in a pandemic and things changed a lot. Like, I'm an LA native. I also, have friends and family here, and just the feel of the city was different. A lot of folks were still like quarantined or just like inside, not socializing as much because there were the different variants rolling around. And so it was just a different space. The industry had changed. Like, it was kind of, it hasn't recovered yet, but it was like, it's about shaky as it is now, where a lot of layoffs were happening. And it was like, is there anything for me to do here? Which is kind of why I ended up taking a pit stop. From New York, I moved to Houston while I was figuring out what I wanted to do and looking for roles.
Mhm.
And while I was in Houston, I actually had applied for the Proud Family role. I saw it and I was like, I really want to work on this project. And it was like nostalgic, but also like meaningful. And I applied for it. And while I was waiting, I was still in Houston. I was like, and I was like, but I'm actually going to move home. I moved to New York without a job. I was like, I want to be home. So I decided to move home. And I was like, I'll figure it out. I got back on, I believe, a Tuesday, and then I received the offer from Proud on the Friday. And then like 2 weeks later, I was working on the show. So it kind of all aligned. And then coming back into animation was different because before I left, we were in physical offices. No one was working in animation really like remotely or hybrid situations. Some artists, I guess, maybe before were doing that, but as far as production, we were all in office. So coming back to animation and working from home was different.
Yeah.
An adjustment and like starting on a team that I hadn't met, like my interview and everything was virtual.
Wow.
So there was no rapport created with the team. And then like shifting to a virtual environment, sort of like when I was working at the architecture and design firm, I started out in office. And then when things shifted and it was like in March, they were like, we're working from home. It was kind of easier to adjust because I had built a rapport and relationships and I knew tones and all of that. But coming to animation in a new team, it was like trying to figure out, hey, like I'm messaging this person, but like most of it is through text, like, what is the undertone of this or is this? And so having to jump on calls and say like, hey, like just wanted to make sure we're aligned, everything's okay. And getting to read people and understand their personalities and them to understand mine as well was a bit of an adjustment.
I can imagine because it is a lot better in terms of just meeting in person, the energy, but as well as getting stuff done. Because then, when you're at home, it's just totally different. I do feel like if you're in the office and everyone's getting work done, you can, if you need to talk to someone, you just need to probably go walk down somewhere where their department is and say, hey, I need to talk to you about this and that, it's totally different. And, so dealing with that, how did you tackle the unpredictability of production, even though that was happening, like doing that virtually?
Well, I mean, I guess everything initially there is an adjustment period. And after those initial hurdles and like figuring those things out and learning personalities and team members and all of that, working from home was ultimately, I was more efficient, although you missed that team interaction.
Yeah.
Ideally, like hybrid, I think is the way to go to like get the best of both worlds. But managing the demands or the unpredictability of animation is just a thing you figure out. I think for me, the biggest thing is not getting caught up in the problem, but taking a minute to pause, accept what it is, and figure out the solution. Because animation, there will always be things like you can plan out and schedule and say like, this is what we're going to do, but that perfect scenario or world it doesn't happen. There's always something that comes up. Someone is sick or there's a tech issue or internet is down or whatever it is, you have to navigate and figure it out. So not getting too caught up in the problem and kind of pivoting and figure out the solution and how to work around it. And for myself, sometimes that is like realizing that things will happen and not taking those things on and like being too stressed about them or like just accepting them as a part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful to just say that because of the fact that when it comes to production, it's always like moving parts, and going on a new platform, even though that, it's still something that you guys can manage. It is all about that. The number one thing is communication, just kind of like reworking everything in case a deadline is not met, and just kind of thinking on your feet.
Plan ahead where you can. If you know, like, now after being in the industry or working on a show for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you kind of expect things to happen. So trying to think ahead and be proactive and plan for those things that may happen, and then adjusting where needed is also helpful. But communication is a big one, like maintaining communication, especially amongst your team.
Yeah, you got to be social. You got to work on the social skills if you can. But yeah, so knowing that you kind of went to the Proud Family, and then you went to the wonderful world of Mickey Mouse, I was wondering, with all that, how did you balance the conditions of production, and how did you protect yourself while working on animation? Like, pretty much like, how did you protect yourself from burnout? How did you navigate just, switching from a different production? Just kind of that.
I'd love to say that I've never burned out. Fortunately, I have, and it's adjusting and realizing that, one, I have to prioritize myself. Mm-hmm. With that, like in the pandemic, I think a lot of us ended up working more than we did when we were in the office, because you're at home and it's easy to just like continue going throughout the day. So as a coordinator, I had 40 hours a week and I wasn't salaried. So there are times where I realized I was working overtime to meet a deadline. I create a tally or a log of my hours. If I ended up working 5 extra hours this day, I would reclaim those later in the week or the next week, like kind of balancing to make sure, I guess, I don't like to say balance. It's like harmony, because sometimes like one week it may be I'm working a little extra hard to complete things because we have a deadline or there's a milestone coming up, but then another week I'll take it a little easier. And then also maintaining practices, like creating some structure for myself. Like I try to meditate twice a day. That doesn't always happen, but like starting my day with time for myself. I typically wake up at 6:30 and I like to do things for myself before I do things for work, so that I maintain myself and my peace and kind of avoid overworking and burning out just by doing work all day. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because I think for everyone, they think by being successful, you must keep going. You must keep going. You must be working on something always. And, resting is something that, you could be doing, like that time that you're using to rest could be used to something else. And that's totally not true. In order to create something that's magic or something that, will inspire people, you need to take that time to rest too. And I loved how you say, instead of balance, it's harmony, because balancing is like having an equal out effect, and that doesn't work that way. And it's just amazing. Meditation is really amazing for your mental state in order to kind of like refresh and reset. So I know people are in the chat, kind of like, I don't do meditation. You gotta try it.
But it's also, maybe meditation isn't for you. Maybe it's working out, like running or doing a circuit class or whatever it is. Maybe for you, it's drawing, like doing your own passion project on the side, like just making time for yourself and whatever you do that grounds you, making time for that. And it's easy, as you were saying, like it's easy to think like, well, I can rest after I do this thing. I just have to keep going. But if you burn yourself out, it's like that goes back to that whole same thing. When you're on an airplane, they say put on your mask first, because if you don't put on your mask, then you can't help anyone. Also, if you're tired and burned out, like it's going to take you longer. Say, for instance, for me, if I continue working at the end of the day, I have a few tasks that I need to complete. And so I'm like, I'll stay on and do this. it may take me an hour and a half to do something that could take me 30 minutes if my brain was functioning and I had rest. So sometimes it's better to just take that rest and recharge and then come back to the task. So finding the way it works for you, but definitely prioritizing your health and your well-being.
Rest is necessary in order to get the work done. Yeah.
And remembering, we're making cartoons. No one's going to die. The show will go on.
Even though it's like, you feel like, like what's going on? Got to get this done. It's true. Cartoons are supposed to be relaxing and supposed to uplift people. And if the people making it are not able to rest or be able to create those cartoons for being uplifting or being, inspirational, or just you feel like you're seen, then it's not going to create that effect if you're not able to do that. So
you're not at your best, you're not going to give your best.
Yeah, for sure. So now just kind of shifting into what you're doing now as a production supervisor of the Proud Family. I wanted to ask, how is it being on a show that has created and continued to create culture within animation? It must be powerful, because I grew up with the Proud Family. A lot of us did. And just knowing that even those couple of seasons that came out in the early 2000s are still being talked about today, it's inspirational.
It is. And I'm like, it's still surreal to be working on this show. I watched it growing up as well. I was a little older than some of you, but I have lots of siblings too. And I watched cartoons, watch all the shows, watch Proud, grew up watching Proud. And to be part of it is just an amazing feeling. Being on a project that is so unapologetically Black and authentic and represents all of the Black diaspora. And like Our Many Tears, there are a lot of shows or films that represent us as like a monolith, but having the varied layers included, the different stories, the different family dynamics. Mm-hmm. It's something that I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, it's really just awe-inspiring, because when it comes to stories, and especially knowing that, a lot of Hollywood, the stories that were told and that were told good were stories that came from white people, right? In a sense. And kind of like when it came to talking about Black stories, it felt like they were a token character, or they were an afterthought, or they fell into a stereotype. And just kind of seeing a show that has been just the way that they just came in, and they didn't just come in just like bam, like they came in thoughtfully, they came in just being themselves. And that was because of the fact that, the writers that were in the room, they knew what it's like being Black, and they knew that, like this narrative of just, the animation, even before that, when it came to Black characters, it was rarely ever like them as an individual. It was kind of like, it kind of fell into this type of, oh, they're really good at sports, or, they're from the hood, and it just,
or an entertainer.
Yeah, or an entertainer. Like, no, like we're all our own different kind of, like, we're all different people. We have different personalities. We have different wants and drives. And I mean, one of the only people that I could see that were not like that were Susie from the Rugrats, and probably Static Shock. But it's just amazing to see that the Proud Family has come back, and louder and prouder, and still has awesome conversations that just kind of like, for example, when one of the twins was diagnosed with autism, that was such a thoughtful conversation that was had. And it kind of, in my sense, I just watched it and it broke it down for me. And Even though I've had family that's dealt with like, being neurodivergent, or they have like mental health, it felt different, because then it was like, it's not sad. They just talked about it, and it was just amazing. So yeah, I can only imagine it's surreal. And I know a lot of people in the chat are probably, they know. So, yeah. So we're kind of going towards time, or not. We want to make some time for some questions. So, I kind of want to ask you some questions about pretty much like, what do you think a aspiring, production coordinator or assistant should focus on when they're expanding their skills and trying to, set them apart from like the rest? Like, pretty much, how does a aspiring like production coordinator or production assistant, have their skills built up, and so that production companies are like, okay, I want this person on our production. Did that make sense? That was a lot.
I believe I understood what you're asking. How do you set yourself apart as a production person applying for a role and trying to get in? Mm-hmm. What skills or skill sets would help you stand apart?
Yeah.
Which one, I'd say a lot of people have a standard resume and it's submitted just the same one for each role. I'd say look at the role that you're applying for and tailor your resume to that specific role. I'd also say talk to someone who works on that show or project or in that industry and ask them if they'd be open to reviewing your resume. Because there have been a lot of times where I see people, I'm like, well, you have this thing that would look great and this kind of reflects the role and what the folks are looking for, but you have this at the bottom. And when recruiters or artist management folk are looking at resumes, they're going through them really quickly. And if what they need to see is buried down at the bottom, then they'll probably just flip and go to the next one because they have hundreds of resumes that they're going through. So taking time to tailor your resume to the role that you're actually applying for is one way to set yourself apart. Also, kind of highlighting yourself, actually knowing yourself as well and your skill set and what you're bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we, as recent grads or early animation folks, will feel like we're in this place of desperation and apply for a role and interview for this role without realizing the value that you're going to bring to this role. Mm-hmm. And who you are. You are a unique individual, and we all have skill sets and things that will add value to the show that we're working on. So figure out what those are for yourself so that you know how to sell those when you're in an interview. Learn some of the programs that people are using on that project or show that you're working on or applying to work on. When like Storyboard Pro, that was a thing I had never heard of until I got in and I was working and learned. So programs like that, or ShotGrid, or Photoshop, there are courses, and there are even like free things like YouTube. There are like courses in things where you can spend time learning so that you learn the basic knowledge so that you have some frame of reference and can go into this role feeling like you're a little more prepared, whereas some folks may not be prepared. So setting yourself apart in that way. Also, learning who the players are. When I apply for a role, I'll go look at LinkedIn and see who's working on that show or that at that company and kind of see what their LinkedIn profile says, or reach out to them via chat and see how their experience is. So knowing the landscape is another way to set yourself apart as well. Join some of the communities or forums on LinkedIn or on Instagram, like Black and Animated is one that you're already setting yourself apart. You're part of this community. Joining like Women in Animation. They also have like these mentorship circles. So participating in those, getting to know people, networking, not only talking to leadership folks, but also getting to know some of the PAs or assistants on those shows, because that is also a way that you can get in. They'll know when their show is hiring. And a lot of times they do source, like, does anyone know anyone, blah, blah, blah. And if you're friends with that person or built a relationship with someone, that is a way for you to set yourself apart and get ahead of just the blanket applications and resumes that are coming through the recruiting system. So I would say those are some great ways to set yourself apart. Also, I recently learned that the Hollywood Radio and Television Society has a set of mentorship programs. I don't know how much the student membership is, if there is a fee at all, but there is a student membership, and then there are other tiers of memberships. But they have even there's a PA mentorship program specifically to Disney, but they also have other studio internships. So that is a path and a way to get in, and also something that would set you apart from everyone else.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's great, to like, amazing advice, because it's really hard when you're trying to enter into this industry and you're just you just want to get into it, that, you know, you see a lot of people coming in and it's just like, I'm just applying and just pray that I get it. And you know, they forget to see the value that, like you said, that they bring. So then it's kind of hard to remember that, because, you know, this is a really exciting field. A lot of people would love to just kind of, you know, start out in their dream job, but they know they have to get to the first steps first. You have to build up from there. And I think it's also great that you were saying that, you know, as well as just reaching out to people on LinkedIn, not being afraid about that. It is really scary because you don't want to burn a bridge in case of you are, you know, just do anything. You're just afraid to do that because you want to get into that. But I think that's really important. And I also wanted to follow up with that. How do you approach someone respectfully on LinkedIn? Because I know that sometimes when I talk to people, they're like, I got this message on LinkedIn and it was so, it just turned me off immediately. So do you have any things that you think kind of, or any like messages you have seen, you're like, I like this person over this person because they did this?
Well, I'd say be intentional. We get a lot of messages. I mean, I'm going to speak for myself. I get a lot of folks like just DMing or like wanting to connect. And I don't just blanket accept or connect with folks, because there are some crazy people, I don't know who's spammy, who's just trolling. So when I receive messages, I also don't check LinkedIn messages as often. I may go on and be on my feed, but when I do check my messages, one, I look to see if this person is reaching out to me specifically, like, is this unique to me? Did you just copy and paste something to everyone? I'm like, like I may accept the request, but engaging as much, I'm like, it wasn't thoughtful. There are some folks that have like taken it upon themselves to do research and find out my Disney email address. And like, they've requested me on LinkedIn, but they've emailed me and they said like, hey, like, I see this role posted for the Proud Family. I see that you are working on it. I am XYZ, and like explaining why they add value and wondering if I have a moment to like do a coffee chat, or wondering what they could do to set themselves apart. But like doing that extra work is, I value those folks that took the time to message me personally and did their own research. I also love when people listen. Some people will reach out, and since I don't check LinkedIn as often, I'll say like, sure, I'm open to doing a coffee chat, email me here. And they won't email me. So read the message and follow up there. So read it, and it shows you're paying attention. It's such a small thing. And it's like, yeah, I may come back on LinkedIn and it may be a week or two before I see that message, and I may see it, but I'm like, the fact that you actually didn't read my message because you didn't email me, you messaged me here. It's like, it says something about you. And so I say that, like, pay attention to what the person is writing. Also, don't just, it's more about quality over quantity. Choose a few folks. You don't have to message 50 people. Also maintain those relationships and build those. Don't just reach out to a person asking for something. So it could be things as like, you friend this person, you celebrate them. Like, you see an accomplishment, like, just like a little bit like, hey, like, that's great, congrats, before you go out and ask for things. And also, it's okay to ask. Sometimes it may be a time like, hey, I see this role and it's immediate, and I'm wondering if you can look at my resume, or if you have time to chat with me, or like run through a like mock interview or whatever. But don't let it be the only time that you reach out is asking for something.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, just treating people with respect, and more than just a connection or just a way to get in. It's so much more valuable having somebody that is there in a field that you understand, and as well as just having a meaningful connection. That's so important.
Yeah. People generally want to help you. And so it's great. Like, don't be afraid to reach out. But do make sure you're reaching out with a purpose, and do it respectfully. And sometimes there's also a thing like, if you reach out to someone and you've messaged them, they haven't messaged you back. Sometimes it's just they're really busy, or you're going through messages, because sometimes folks will email me and it may take a few days until I get back to it. I saw it and I'm like, I'm going to email, but I need to look at my schedule and see when I have availability. But someone else may have walked up to me at the office and then I got distracted. And so that email was already marked as read. And then a couple days later, I'll realize I'm like, so-and-so emailed me. I need to follow up on that. So, but on your end, if a few days have passed, don't be afraid to follow up and say like, hey, I reached out like, Monday, it's Thursday, I just want to circle back, or even the next week. If it's not urgent or time sensitive, just follow up and say, hey, just want to follow up on this, wondering if you're available. Also, if you're doing those, I appreciate when folks reach out and say like, they'll set up the thing like, I'm wondering what your availability is. And if I like message them and say like, hey, Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, the folks that go ahead and like send me a Zoom link instead of waiting for me to send them a Zoom link, that says a lot as well.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's really useful information, especially when people are just kind of going about this as like a new area for them, contacting professionals, and just kind of getting into this field. Because I know from my standpoint, I also didn't take a traditional route. I was an anthropology major. And then I decided my last year of college, I was like, I'm going to go for animation. And it's kind of like, once you get in there, once you start setting up your LinkedIn and everything, you just don't know how to go about it. And just having just proper etiquette, if you're going to reach out to someone that's doing something that you want to do, just, like you said, be intentional. Being a decent human being, because everyone deserves to be respected as a person. So, thank you for answering that, because I know that can be a hot button topic for people that want to come through and just kind of get the information. I will say, having information on how to progress in animation is a very tight block thing. It's not readily accessible information. You can't search up stuff and be like, okay, this is where I want to go. How do I take the steps to get there? What are the, if I wanted to be, for example, a showrunner, how do I what's the lowest, where do I start? It's not something that you can research. So having those meaningful conversations with professionals that are actually in there, in the field is very important, but going about it in a professional, but also respectful way is even more important. So my last question is that I have, and then we're going to open it up to everyone else, and everyone that has questions, please type it into the Q&A so we can be able to do that, answer your questions. What is something aspiring production professional doesn't know that they should know entering into this field?
It's a small world. Animation is a small world. So be very mindful of that, like of trying not to burn bridges, because if you do that very early on in your career, it will probably come to bite you in the butt because it's such a small world. Also, a title/role can vary from studio to studio, also from production to production within a studio. So be mindful of that. There have been folks that I've forwarded their resume along for things, and someone reaches out to them for a PA role, and they may decline that role because of how they perceive a PA role or what they think it may be. But at some studios, what could be a PA role at one could be coordinator responsibilities at another. So don't just automatically be dismissive of something. Take time to understand what it is, and you should never accept something that isn't right for you, but take time to see what it is and explore it before you dismiss a thing, because it can be a totally different role. So I would say be mindful of that. A lot more goes into creating a show than I ever imagined or could imagine. So be kind to yourself. It is a learning experience. Do your best at whatever role you're in, because even when you think people aren't paying attention, someone is paying attention. Also, don't be afraid to speak to people and expand your network, but do it intentionally again. But one of the things I think I was recently talking with someone about was someone made a comment in saying that I was pretty popular. And I was like, I'm not, but I guess I know a bunch of people here, but it's because I do small things. When I see someone in the studio that I pass, I'm like, I have never met them. I go in to maybe get a tea and someone else is in there. I'll say, hi, what's your name? And then they'll tell me their name. I'll introduce myself and I'll ask them which project they work on. And that kind of is the beginning of building a relationship. And neither of us, it wasn't a transactional thing. I totally don't know what they do, but now when I see them next time in the office, they say hello, I say hello, and it could go somewhere, but it also may not go anywhere beyond saying hello. But you're introducing yourself to people, and it's such an easy way to meet people and start to build your network. So don't be afraid to say hello to people and ask them what they do. So there's that. And what else would I say? Something I didn't know. Don't be afraid to ask questions and always stay curious. One, no one owes you anything. We have a tendency to believe that people owe us things, but you are accountable for yourself and your career growth. So make sure that you're doing what you can. You speak up for yourself. You ask for the things that you want, and don't expect people to hand them to you. I think that covers it.
Yeah. All very great and very helpful. Thank you so much for, answering the questions and just pretty much just giving your advice and taking the time. I really appreciate it. And I think everyone else does. So with that goes into the Q&A portion. So Madison is here and says, cool that you work for Disney. I did the Disney College program last year and had a good experience with the company. Outside of the parks, I'm mainly interested in working in production. How was/is your experience working in production at Disney?
My experience working at Disney has been great. I also speak for myself. I've had the luxury of participating in a couple different programs. I also have worked on 3 different projects within the last almost 2 years. And one I'm working on Proud, which happens to be a super diverse team, which is very rare in my experience. And so I'm super excited about that, to work on this project with socioeconomic status, sexuality, identity. Like, it's just, our team is incredibly diverse. And I don't know, like, I feel like we're like a snowflake, but I've also worked on other projects that have had different experiences. Some projects are more demanding than others. Some are a little smoother, easier. Each show has its pros and cons, but so far my experience at Disney has been pretty great. What else? I feel like I wanted to say something else and I lost my train of thought.
It's all good.
Maybe it'll come back to me.
All right. Okay. The next one says, hello. First, I want to say thank you for coming out and speaking today. Do you have any advice for students, specifically seniors, who want to invite recruiters / other industry professionals to senior shows / galleries?
I don't have experience with that, so I don't know that I have advice. I know that some folks have had, some of like our showrunner has gone to a senior art showcase of a student. I'm not sure how they navigated that. I heard about the story on the back end. I imagine that some people built these relationships with folks through social media and may invite them. But that's not my area of expertise or something that I'm experienced in. So I hesitate to give you a suggestion. I would say maybe start by building a relationship with that person. And I don't think anyone would be put off by like sharing that via LinkedIn or like posting it on your wall and like maybe tagging someone in the comments or direct messaging a recruiter and saying like, hey, like, I don't know if it's Disney. Hey, I'd love to, I have a goal of working at Disney. I see this XYZ. I am currently a student at blah, blah, blah. We have a senior art case, wondering if there's a way that I can extend an invite to you or your team. It's a respectful way. You ask, all they can do is say no. So I'd say shoot your shot, but the success of it, I don't know because I haven't done it and don't know the details of the people that I have heard that have successfully navigated it.
Yeah. Okay. So for the follow-up, not to that question, but to the one about the 2 separate resumes and wanting to reach out to people in the animation field, they said basically want to pivot into animation, but my field is related to science.
Current experience in science, you want to pivot to animation. I would encourage you to update your LinkedIn profile to reflect any experience you have. But even though you have a science background, I wouldn't completely delete that because that's important and valid and can add value to whatever show you go on, because there are animated science shows. I don't know if that's something you want to do, but just tailor your profile to show that this is something that you're trying to do. If you're taking any courses or have taken any courses, highlight those on your profile. And that your headline, I would make that tailored to, or make it known that you're interested in animation and you're working to pivot there. Because if you submitted a resume, like, I don't know if you sent me a resume and it was just science focused and only focused on those your past career experiences and background, but had nothing to do with animation, I potentially could be hesitant for if I have another resume of someone who clearly displays their interest in animation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And from someone that has done, I have experience that is not related to animation. I would recommend even doing like a resume summary and saying like, hi, I'm a driven professional with a passion for animation. I'm adept in tracking assets or maintaining databases. Because I can imagine if you're in science, then you're kind of entering into databases certain samples of things. So I would recommend even like searching up like what are the skills for this role that I want to go into, and if it's organization, tracking assets and stuff like that, tailor it to that. So I recommend that. And
that is great advice, Jordan. Yeah, I'm liking those transferable skills.
Yeah, one thing I've heard is transferable skills are everything.
The summary as well. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead.
I was saying doing the career summary too, because I've actually done that too. Because as you've seen, like I've had quite a few different jobs, and sometimes like putting everything on there may push, like, since I took I guess like 3-year break from specific animation, like it's like, oh, you left, like, why was this? So sometimes I'll just do like career summary, and then I'd highlight my animation roles and remove the roles that didn't apply to animation or didn't have transferable skills, or highlight those, or I didn't find that they were necessary, because if I added this, it would make my resume 2 pages, which is a whole different conversation. But I just like personally to keep mine to 1 page. So I'll remove some things so that I stick to that format. But that was great advice, Jordan.
Yeah, well, great advice from you too. Tag team. So thank you for your question. We have a question from Mel. Hi, Mel. Knowing what you know now, how would you recommend someone with no experience in the industry go about it? Is networking the way to go, or conference helpful?
Well, my experience, everyone's path is different. I did not go conference routes, one, because I didn't intend, like I didn't plan to be in animation, but from knowing what I know, I say there's value in both. But I also would say a lot of conferences like charge a fee, and I don't think you necessarily get more value there than connecting on LinkedIn. I'd say if you're doing both, there's no harm in doing both, but being intentional about LinkedIn connections could get you further, or joining groups or communities like Black and Animated, Women in Animation. I think I had a friend who was recently recruiting or staffing up for a show she's working on. And I reached out to Brie and I'm like, hey, if you know any folks. So those are ways like people reach out directly to some of the groups. And so you may get an in that way. But you also could run into someone in person at a conference and could land a job that way. I'm sure plenty of people have done that as well. But for me, I didn't go the conference route. But I can see value in both.
Yeah, just showing that you're interested, joining organizations like BNA, you already got that taken care of. It is just all about just being involved in those spaces, and something should come up. So
learning a new skill instead of going to a conference could add value and set you apart.
Yeah. Also, I know that there's, programs in UCLA and also USC that kind of have those things where if you're out of college, you can do like a little program. I know they might be a bit expensive, but it could help prepare you. So just looking out for that. And thank you for your question, Jada. So the next one is, what are the differences between a production supervisor, a coordinator, and a PA? I'm interested in the production path and was wondering what the differences were between these roles. Oh yeah, those are a lot.
One, as I mentioned earlier, the roles and the titles can vary from studio to studio, production to production, but generally, everyone's one job is to get a great show delivered on time and within the budget. How that's broken down, in between that, like one, I guess there's like a trickle down. So each show can have a different structure as well. Some shows may have a producer, a line producer, or I'll just go through all the types. It could be a producer, a line producer, associate producer, manager, supervisor, coordinator, PA, secretary. So usually a show doesn't have all of those. It will have some of those, depending on what a show's budget is or a need is on the show. Any of those roles can be part of it. And then the division of labor and work is broken down based on that structure. And so above me, I have my leadership, and my responsibility is like supporting them and making sure that we're delivering a show on time, and making sure we're hitting our milestones for the show. And then also below me, I'm responsible for, or I'll say beside me, I'm responsible for overseeing our coordinators and mentoring them and making sure that they have the tools that they need to complete their jobs. And so their job from my job, the difference is they're responsible for specific episodes, whereas I'm overseeing all of the episodes and helping our coordinators reach their goals. Some shows are departmental, whereas they may have like a storyboard department, a design department, a retakes department, and they have coordinators for each of those departments. And so if you're a coordinator working on a departmental show, you may only see the storyboard phases if you're a storyboard coordinator or a storyboard PA. And if you're a design PA, you would only see the design phase of all of this. And a retakes, you would only see the retake section of all of it. But then there are shows that are episodic, where as a coordinator, you will follow an episode through the entire pipeline from pre-production through production, until it ships to the overseas vendor for animation. And so depending on which type of show you're working on, your responsibilities could vary. But essentially, you're handing out work to designers or board artists, making sure that those things are being, those assets are being either like for storyboards, you may be helping to export MOV files for a pitch. If you're a design coordinator, could be helping to manage those assets, hand out those assignments to the designers and making sure they're delivering on time. If there are any issues, you would flag those issues to either your supervisor and or leadership team, and figure out a plan and a way to adjust to hopefully still deliver that show on time, which could be flagging that and someone ended up doing overtime, or you're getting a freelancer, and then some of those responsibilities like handling like freelancing and overtime, some of those responsibilities may shift back to the supervisor, which is like me. I may be sorting out those things and communicating back and forth with designers and seeing if they're available for overtime, how much overtime we can offer. And that communication may also be with those above me, figuring out what our budget is and what we can offer in overtime to still deliver a great show on time within budget. And then as far as a PA, the PA is helping to support the coordinator. So they may be helping the coordinator deliver assets, archive those assets, prepare those assets for a design review per se, or helping with the pitch. And it's kind of sometimes the roles or duties can overlap, because with our team per se, we have sometimes it's all on deck and we're helping one another. Sometimes I could be breaking down an episode, which is typically something that the episode coordinator may do, but they could be tied up doing a pitch and need support. And so just being open to kind of doing anything. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Whoever asked the question.
Yeah, I think that definitely answers the question. And thank you for being very thoughtful in explaining that, because yeah, this information is really hard to just look for in terms of like what are the specific roles and how does that work out. So thank you for that question. We're running out of time because we're gonna end around 3:15. Okay, this is kind of hard because there's a couple of good questions, but I am going to say I'm going to combine two. As someone has graduated last year and struggles to find work, is a PA position a good way to start? I'm interested in PA and art positions. And yeah.
I'd say a PA position is a great place to start, but I also would say even a secretary role would be great so that you allow yourself time to learn the players. And if you haven't had any actual on real life job industry experience, that is a way to get in and learn without having all of the pressures of completing the task of a PA. One, also, as I just said, like the role of a PA can vary from show to show. There are some shows where a PA role is doing what could be a coordinator role in another show. So understanding what those roles and responsibilities are for the job you're applying for. That's something that I think you would ask in the interview. Also, if I guess on the job forums or websites, the role descriptions are a bit vague. And so it's hard to really tell what you would be doing. So in that interview, asking what the day-to-day looks like, asking what the hurdles for a person in that role would be, asking how success is measured in that role, understanding if there was someone in that role, understanding or asking why that person left. It could be that person received a promotion. It could be the person went to something else. Asking those questions to better understand what the expectations would be for you and for yourself, knowing yourself and if you can handle that role. Don't discount yourself. Sometimes you will not, like, the job description or the expectations for that role is like the ideal scenario. So if you cannot do 100% of that, great. Like, don't just turn it down based on that, because you're supposed to be growing. You grow into a role. If you went into that role and you can do everything 100% hands down, then you should be applying for something else. But be realistic with yourself. So applying for a secretary role could allow you the opportunity to get in and see what it actually is like before jumping over.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have today. So I want to thank everyone for coming in and, listening to Roshell talk. It was such a pleasure to chat with you, as well as just learn so much about your journey. It was very awe-inspiring. I hope you had a good time hanging with Black and Animated today.
I did. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Jordan, for hosting, and thank you, Bree. Also, thank you all for being here. I am honored that you guys wanted to hear my experience and about my journey, and you had some great questions. Wishing you all the best of luck on your journeys. Enjoy the rest of your day.